Tonight, many of America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
We don't know what to do with it because we don't know where it's going to go.
Should I plant my crop, man? This ain't looking good.
President Trump says these tariffs will help American farmers and ranchers, but farmers and ag economists tell me they're worried, and they think this will not only hurt California farmers, but also California consumers at the grocery store.
We're going to lose another generation of farmers.
What would happen to your farm and to your business if they are all sent back to their home country?
If that would happen, I'm out of business.
I got to farm with my dad every day. It's a way of life. It's a wonderful way of life. And it's at risk. And it shouldn't be.
When a dominant supplier loses ground, the most important question is not why it happened, but who steps in next. As U.S. wheat exports stall across key African markets, the space they once occupied is not sitting empty. It is being filled quickly, deliberately, and with long-term consequences that extend far beyond grain shipments. The global wheat trade is reorganizing, and Africa is at the center of that realignment. The countries stepping in are not simply offering wheat, they are offering systems. In recent years, several exporters have moved aggressively to position themselves as comprehensive food security partners rather than transactional sellers. Their approach recognizes a shift in buyer priorities. African governments are no longer interested in volume alone. They want stability, flexibility, and political insulation. One of the most important differences lies in pricing structures. Alternative suppliers are increasingly willing to denominate contracts in currencies other than the dollar or to offer hybrid payment arrangements that reduce exposure to currency volatility. For economies under pressure from inflation and debt, this flexibility is not a minor perk, it is a decisive advantage. Another factor is proximity. Shorter shipping routes lower costs, reduce delivery risk, and make supply chains more resilient to disruptions. In a world where port congestion, insurance spikes, and fuel price volatility are persistent threats, distance matters. Suppliers closer to African markets can respond faster and adjust volumes with less friction. Reliability now trumps tradition. During past global shocks, African importers learned a difficult lesson. Even long-standing suppliers can become unreliable when domestic pressures rise. Export restrictions, political priorities, and sudden policy shifts elsewhere created uncertainty. That experience fundamentally altered how food security is calculated. As a result, African states are spreading risk. Rather than placing faith in a single major exporter, they are cultivating multiple supply relationships, even if that means breaking decades-old patterns. But the wheat itself is only part of the picture. The real shift is in how wheat is integrated into broader economic strategies. Instead of simply importing finished grain, African governments are increasingly seeking partnerships that include local milling capacity, storage infrastructure, logistics hubs, and agricultural training. These additions reduce dependence and create domestic value. Suppliers who are willing to invest beyond the shipment gain an edge. This is where the U.S. export model begins to struggle. Its system is highly efficient at producing and exporting grain but less flexible when buyers demand localized integration and development support. Competing exporters have adapted faster to this new demand. What is emerging is a new form of food diplomacy. Wheat is bundled with infrastructure. Grain contracts are tied to port upgrades, rail connections, or financing mechanisms. Food becomes part of a strategic package designed to lock in long-term alignment. For African governments, this approach offers more than calories. It offers leverage. By anchoring food imports to broader national development goals, states reduce vulnerability to external pressure. They gain room to maneuver politically and economically, and they reinforce sovereignty over their food systems. For exporters, the payoff is access not just to a market, but to influence. This is why the loss of U.S. wheat market share is not a narrow agricultural issue. It represents a broader erosion of economic presence. Once supply chains realign, they harden, shipping routes adjust, storage facilities are built, financing arrangements are institutionalized. Returning later is expensive and often politically awkward. The shift also exposes a mismatch in expectations. Many U.S. stakeholders assumed that competitive quality and reliability would be enough to retain markets, but quality alone does not guarantee loyalty when buyers feel structurally exposed. Food security is now judged through a lens shaped by crisis experiences. For Africa, the priority is control. Control over pricing, control over delivery, control over political exposure. Any supplier that undermines those goals even unintentionally becomes less attractive over time. There is also a generational dimension to this shift. A new cohort of policymakers across the continent has grown up in an era of multipolar competition. They are comfortable navigating between multiple partners. They view diversification as strength rather than disloyalty. This mindset contrasts sharply with older frameworks that treated trade alignment as fixed or ideological. The new logic is transactional, strategic, and pragmatic. That pragmatism explains why Africa's wheat sourcing decisions are rarely framed as confrontational. There are no dramatic announcements, no rhetorical escalation. There is simply movement, contracts signed elsewhere, volumes redirected, new infrastructure commissioned. From the outside, it may look incremental, but aggregated across markets, the impact is profound. For the U.S., this raises difficult questions. Can its export system evolve from volume-based dominance to partnership-based competition? Can it adapt financial and logistical models to match new buyer expectations? And can it do so fast enough to prevent further erosion? These questions matter because wheat is not an isolated case. Similar pressures are visible across multiple commodity sectors. When trade relationships weaken, they rarely recover in their original form. Africa's pivot signals something larger, a recalibration of how power flows through trade. For decades, access to essential commodities gave exporters leverage. Today, diversified sourcing gives buyers leverage instead. That reversal alters bargaining dynamics across the global economy. It also reshapes diplomatic influence. Economic presence reinforces political voice. When trade ties loosen, so does informal influence. Food, once a stabilizing link, becomes neutral or disappears altogether. The consequences extend into global pricing mechanisms. As new suppliers gain market share, benchmark prices shift, insurance models adjust risk profiles, shipping demand patterns change. These secondary effects reinforce the primary realignment, making reversal harder. None of this implies that U.S. wheat is irrelevant. It remains a major global supplier, but dominance is not the same as indispensability, and in today's market, indispensability is the true currency of power. The African wheat market is signaling a clear preference: flexibility over familiarity, partnership over dependence, and strategic alignment over historical precedent. That signal is being heard, just not by everyone. Something quiet but consequential is happening in the global food system, and it's hitting at the core of global trade dynamics. Wheat exports, long considered a pillar of worldwide food supply, are running into an unexpected wall. Key African markets are turning away, signing new deals, and sourcing grain elsewhere. This isn't about weather or harvest cycles. It's about power, leverage, and a reshaping of food security relationships. Tonight, we break down why wheat exports are losing ground, why African buyers are moving on, and what this shift means for global trade, prices, and influence. For decades, wheat functioned as a quiet superpower. It wasn't just a crop, it was leverage. Shipments fed cities, stabilized fragile economies, and anchored long-term trade relationships across Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Grain moved not only calories but influence. Dependence on wheat also meant reliance on shipping systems, pricing mechanisms, insurance frameworks, and financial channels tied to exporters. That system is now under strain. Across several African markets, import patterns are shifting, contracts are being renegotiated, suppliers are changing. In some cases, wheat from traditional exporters is no longer the first choice or even a choice at all. This is not because Africa suddenly stopped needing wheat. Demand continues to rise as populations grow and urbanize. Bread, pasta, and flour-based staples remain central to food security strategies across the continent. The problem is cost, reliability, and control. Wheat prices have become less competitive relative to alternatives. Transport costs, insurance premiums, and pricing volatility have eroded affordability. Currency fluctuations tied to dollar-based trade have amplified costs for importers already facing budget pressure. At the same time, African governments have grown more sensitive to dependence. Food security is political stability. A missed shipment, a price spike, or an unexpected restriction can ignite unrest. Recent global supply shocks exposed how fragile long-distance, single-source dependencies can be. As a result, procurement strategies are being rethought. Increasingly, wheat imports are bundled into wider agreements: infrastructure development, agricultural investment, localized milling, or technology transfer. Grain is no longer purchased in isolation. It is part of a strategic package. That model favors suppliers willing to integrate into broader development goals. Exporters operating on older frameworks are finding it harder to compete. This realignment also reflects growing confidence. Where options were once limited, competition is now visible. Multiple suppliers are active. Shipping routes are diversified. Financing structures are more flexible. Choice creates leverage, and leverage changes behavior. When buyers have alternatives, sellers must adapt. Adaptation, however, has been slow. Many export systems still operate on assumptions formed decades ago.